Friend, I want you to pause for a moment and think about the biggest problem you are facing right now. Maybe it's a financial struggle. Maybe it's a relationship that feels broken. Maybe it's a health issue that keeps you awake at night. Or maybe it's the weight of anxiety that no one else sees. We all carry something heavy, but here's the truth you need to hold on to. God's plan for your life is bigger than any problem you will ever face. When we are in the middle of the storm, it feels like the storm is all there is. The waves crash so loudly, we can't hear anything else. But God sees the other side of the storm. He doesn't just see where you are. He sees where He's taking you. The problems that seem so overwhelming to you are not overwhelming to Him. What feels like an ending to you can actually be the beginning of something greater in His plan. You see, problems have a way of shrinking our vision. They make us focus only on what hurts, what's broken, and what's missing. But God's plan stretches far beyond what your eyes can see. He is weaving together the pieces of your life into something good, even when the pieces don't make sense right now. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who raised the dead, who turned the cross into an empty tomb, that God is still writing your story. And if He can bring victory out of what looked like defeat, He can do the same for you. So don't let your problems define you. Don't let them convince you that God has forgotten you. Remember this, your problems are temporary, but God's plan is eternal. Your problems may seem big today, but His power is greater tomorrow. Hold on, trust Him, keep walking, because the very problem that feels like it's breaking you might be the place where God is building you. And one day you'll look back and realize that the problem you thought would destroy you was actually the platform God used to show His power through you. When you are standing in the middle of life's storm, it's hard to see anything but the rain, the thunder, and the crashing waves around you. The storm feels all-consuming, like it has the final word, like it will never end. But the truth is, God sees beyond what you can see. While you are focused on the wind shaking your boat, God already knows where the storm is leading. He already sees the calm seas on the other side. He already sees the lessons you will carry, the growth you will experience, and the testimony that will come out of what feels unbearable right now. Nothing in your life catches Him by surprise. He is not sitting in heaven wondering how you will make it through this one. He is not pacing, anxious, or unprepared. Long before you stepped into this difficulty, He had already planned the way out. Long before you felt overwhelmed, He had already prepared the strength you would need. Long before you cried your first tear, He had already stored up the comfort to dry it. He sees beyond the storm because He stands outside of time. And while you only see the present chaos, He already sees the future victory. Think about how small our vision is compared to His. We are like people staring at one piece of a giant puzzle. All we can see is the jagged edge and the confusion of where it fits. But God sees the whole picture at once. He knows how every piece, even the painful ones, come together to make something beautiful. The storm you are in feels like the whole story, but in God's eyes, it's just one chapter in a much bigger book. It's just one brushstroke in the masterpiece He is painting. When you only focus on the storm, it seems endless and suffocating, but when you trust that God sees beyond it, you realize it is not the destination, it is just part of the journey. We often pray for the storm to stop immediately, but sometimes God allows the storm to continue because He is doing something in you that calm weather could never do. Storms reveal things about your faith, your trust, your resilience, and your dependence on Him. God's plan was not designed to crumble under the weight of your problems. His plan is stronger, deeper, and unshakable. Think of how fragile life can feel. Jobs change, relationships break, health declines, finances shift. The things we rely on most can feel uncertain. But God's plan is not fragile. It does not crack under pressure. It is not derailed by what surprises you. It is not canceled by your mistakes or delayed by your setbacks. Problems are interruptions, but God's plan is a foundation. Problems are temporary detours, but His plan is the map that never changes. Problems may shout loudly in the moment, but His plan whispers steadily through eternity. There is comfort in knowing that while your problems have an expiration date, God's plan does not. The broken heart you feel today will not always hurt this way. The sleepless nights will not last forever. The financial struggle is not the final word over your life. These problems, though heavy, are temporary. But God's plan is forever anchored in his promises. He has declared that he will never leave you, and that truth will remain when the storm passes. He has declared that he will work all things together for good, and that truth will stand when your circumstances shift. He has declared that his love for you is everlasting, and that truth does not change with the seasons of your life. Sometimes we mistake the size of our problems for the size of their power. Just because a problem feels big doesn't mean it has lasting authority. You may be facing something that seems impossible to solve, but its power is limited. It cannot undo the eternal purposes God has spoken over your life. It cannot cancel the calling placed inside you. It cannot erase the promises written in his word. Problems can slow you down, distract you, frustrate you, but they cannot destroy what God has set into motion. His plan is bigger, stronger, and lasting. Think about how many stories in Scripture point to this truth. Joseph's years of betrayal, slavery, and prison felt overwhelming, but they were temporary compared to the eternal plan God had to position him in leadership and save nations. Job's suffering was intense, but it was not endless. And in the end, God restored more than he had lost. While Paul's hardships, beatings, prisons, persecution were real and painful, but he called them a light and momentary compared to the eternal glory being prepared. The problems in each of these lives did not last forever, but God's purposes endured and triumphed. When you remember that problems are temporary, it changes the way you walk through them. You stop giving them ultimate power. You stop letting them define your identity. You stop believing that they are forever. And when you remember that God's plan is eternal, it gives you hope in the middle of the hardest days. Hope that this pain has an end date. Hope that this season will shift. Hope that what God has promised is still secure, even if everything else feels uncertain. Problems cannot outlast the God who holds eternity. Your problems may have started yesterday or last year, but they will not last into forever. They belong to time, but God's plan belongs to eternity. Your problems may seem endless, but in God's eyes, they are momentary. They may bend you, but they will not break his purpose for you. Every problem has an end point, but his plan has no ending. His love has no ending. His presence has no ending. His presence has no ending. And his work in you is not finished until he completes it. What looks like a setback in your life may actually be the setup for something greater that God is preparing. We see obstacles as roadblocks, but often they are stepping stones in disguise. When plans fall apart, when doors close, when opportunities disappear, it feels like failure. It feels like life is moving backward instead of forward. But God has a way of turning the very things that seem to hinder us into the things that prepare us for a future we cannot yet imagine. What feels like a setback to you is often the stage being built for the next act in God's story for your life. There are moments when you thought you were ready, but God knew you needed more preparation. There are places you wanted to go, but God knew they would have hurt you if you arrived too soon. There are opportunities you thought were perfect, but God knew they would have distracted you from his best. In those moments, what looks like rejection is really protection. What looks like a delay is actually development. What looks like a detour is really direction. God never wastes the seasons that feel like setbacks. He uses them to shape you, to deepen you, and to prepare you for where he is leading. Think about how often in life we grow the most during the hardest seasons. When everything is going smoothly, we tend to rely on our own strength and wisdom. But when things fall apart, we are pushed to depend on God in new ways. The setback forces us to let go of our own control and lean fully on him. And in the process, he develops character, faith, and resilience in us that we never would have discovered otherwise. The pain of the setback is real, but so is the growth that comes out of it. God is not just concerned with what you accomplish. He is concerned with who you become. And many times it is the seasons of setback that shape the deepest parts of who you are. Consider Joseph's life. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, thrown into prison. On the surface, his story looked like a chain of setbacks. Each event seemed to take him further away from his dreams. But in reality, each step was a setup for the greater plan God had in store. The pit positioned him for Egypt, the prison prepared him for leadership, and the palace fulfilled the promise. What looked like setbacks were actually necessary steps to place him exactly where he needed to be. The same is true for you. What feels like it is pulling you away from your destiny may actually be pushing you right into it. Setbacks also shift our perspective. They remind us that our worth is not tied to our circumstances, our success, or our comfort. They strip away the illusion that we are in control, and they remind us that God's plan is greater than anything we could orchestrate. A door closing may hurt in the moment, but it often protects you from walking into a place that would not have led to his best. A relationship ending may feel like loss, but it may also be the space God uses to bring the right people into your life. A failed plan may sting, but it may also be the opening for something you never would have considered on your own. Even in the darkest moments, God is positioning you. The delay you are experiencing could be saving you from future harm. The loss you feel could be clearing space for greater provision. The silence you hear could be God's way of strengthening your faith so you will be ready for what He has prepared. You are not forgotten in the setback. You are being refined in it. And the very thing you thought disqualified, you may become the very thing God uses to qualify you for His greater purpose. If you look back on your life, you will probably see times when what you thought was the end turned out to be a beginning. That job you didn't get opened the way for a better one. That relationship that ended cleared space for healing and growth. That plan that failed redirected you to something more meaningful. In the moment, it felt like defeat, but in hindsight, it was grace. And the same God who worked through those setbacks before is working through the ones you face now. Setbacks are not signs of abandonment. They are often signs of alignment. God is aligning your steps with His will, even when it doesn't look like it. He is aligning your heart with His character, even when it feels painful. He is aligning your life with His timing, even when it feels slow. What looks like a step backward is often the exact step forward you need, just in a direction you didn't expect. Your struggles do not have the authority to define who you are. They may shape your circumstances, they may affect how you feel, and they may even alter the path you take. But they do not get the final word over your identity. God's promises are what define you, and His promises do not shift with the seasons of your life. They are unchanging, steady, and eternal. When you allow struggles to dictate who you are, you shrink your worth down to your pain. But when you allow God's promises to define you, you rise above the weight of your circumstances and live from a place of truth that no problem can erase. Struggles have a loud voice. They tell you that you are weak, that you are forgotten, They whisper lies that because you are in pain, you are broken beyond repair, or because you made a mistake, you are disqualified from God's plan. God's plan. Struggles want to attach labels to your life. Labels like unworthy, hopeless, unlovable, defeated. But those labels do not come from God. He has already spoken a different word over your life, and His word is greater than your struggles. He calls you chosen, loved, redeemed, and more than a conqueror. He declares that you are His child, that you are forgiven, that you are created with purpose. None of these truths are canceled because you're walking through hard times. They stand firm even in the middle of the storm. It is easy to confuse what you are going through with who you are. If you are facing financial hardship, you begin to think you are a failure. If you are battling sickness, you start to see yourself as weak. If you are struggling with a broken relationship, you begin to believe you are unlovable. But your circumstances are not your identity. They are experiences, not definitions. Who you are is rooted in God's design and God's promises, not in the temporary struggles that weigh you down. When you anchor your identity in Him, You find strength to walk through anything because you know that nothing you face can rewrite the truth of who you are in His eyes. Scripture is full of people whose struggles could have defined them, but God's promises spoke louder. Moses was a man with a stutter, yet God called him to lead a nation. Gideon was full of fear, yet God called him a mighty warrior. David was overlooked by his family, yet God anointed him as king. Paul had a past of persecuting believers, yet God used him to spread the gospel. In every case, their struggles could have written their story, but God's promises declared something greater. The same is true for you. Your struggles may be real, but God's promises are truer still. Truer still. When struggles come, they test where you are placing your identity. If your sense of worth is tied to your success, then failure will shatter you. If it is tied to people's approval, then rejection will undo you. If it is tied to your comfort, then hardship will discourage you. But if your identity is tied to God's promises, then no struggle has the power to undo you. Because His promises are unchanging, your identity remains secure even when everything else feels unstable. Struggles shake the ground beneath you, but His promises are the rock you can stand on. The enemy would love for you to believe that your struggle disqualifies you, but in reality, struggles often become the very place where God shows His strength through you. He never promised you a life without problems, but He did promise to be with you in them. He did promise that His grace would be sufficient, that His power would be made perfect in weakness, and that His love would never fail. These promises remind you that your struggles are not evidence of abandonment, but evidence that you are human in need of His divine presence. And in that need, He meets you with all that He is. Your struggles are not your story. They are only a part of it. They may be a chapter, but they are not the title of the book. God's promises are the title, and that title is victory, redemption, and purpose. Every struggle you face can either push you toward despair or draw you closer to the promises that give you hope. The choice is where you fix your eyes. If you look only at the struggle, you will feel crushed by its weight. But if you lift your eyes to God's promises, you will find the strength to endure. His promises remind you that you are more than what you are facing, and that there is more to your story than what you see today. The very problem that threatens to break you can become the very place where God builds you. What feels like the weight that will crush you is often the pressure God uses to shape you. Just as a diamond is formed under intense pressure and gold is refined through fire, your character, your faith, and your resilience are often strengthened through the struggles you face. Nobody prays for problems, nobody asks for pain, but when those seasons arrive, they can become the soil where God grows something in you that prosperity and ease never could. What looks like breaking is often building, and what feels like loss can lead to greater gain. When you are pressed on every side, you discover a strength in God that you never knew you had. When the bottom falls out, you learn that He really is your foundation. When everything else is stripped away, you realize His presence is enough to sustain you. Problems have a way of bringing you to the end of yourself, and at that point you discover the beginning of His power. Without the breaking, you might never know the depth of His building. Without the struggle, you might never discover the strength of His promises. Think of how many people in Scripture were built in the middle of what looked like breaking moments. Jacob wrestled all night with God, and he walked away limping but transformed, carrying a new name and a new identity. Daniel was thrown into a den of lions, but that very place of danger became the platform where God's power was displayed and his faith was strengthened. Peter denied Jesus 3 times, broken by his own failure, but it was that same brokenness that humbled him and built him into the bold preacher who would lead thousands to faith. What looked like the end was actually the place where God did His deepest work. Your problems may feel like they are tearing you apart, but they can also be the tools God uses to put you together in a way that nothing else could. Every tear you cry waters the ground where your faith grows. Every disappointment clears away the false hopes you once clung to, making space for real hope to take root. Every trial chisels away the parts of you that don't belong, shaping you more and more into the image of Christ. It is not easy, it is not painless, but it is purposeful. God does not waste your struggles. He uses them to build something in you that will last. When you begin to see your problems through this lens, your perspective shifts. Instead of asking only, oh, why? Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of your circumstances, you begin to see yourself as a student in God's classroom. Instead of believing you are being broken beyond repair, you begin to realize you are being built for something greater than you can see. This doesn't take away the pain, but it gives the pain purpose. And when pain has purpose, it becomes bearable. God builds patience in the waiting. He builds perseverance in the trials. He builds compassion through the wounds. He builds humility through the failures. He builds courage in the face of fear. Every quality of strength and character that makes you who you are is often forged in the fire of struggle. What you think is breaking you down may actually be building you up into the person God created you to be. And one day you will look back at what you thought was your lowest moment and realize it was actually the foundation for your strongest season. It is in those breaking moments that your testimony is born, a story you will one day tell others about how you overcame, how you endured, how you kept believing, even when everything seemed impossible. The testimony is being written in your struggle right now. And that testimony will not only remind you of God's faithfulness, but it will also encourage others who are walking through their own storms. The building is not just for you. It is for the people your story will inspire. So the problem you are facing today, as heavy as it feels, is not the end of your story. It may be the very beginning of a new chapter where God shows his strength through your weakness. It may be the place where you are transformed, where your faith is refined, where your character is shaped, and where your hope is renewed. What threatens to break you today could be the very thing that builds you tomorrow. And when you stand on the other side of the season, stronger, deeper, and more rooted than ever, you will know without a doubt that God's plan was bigger than your problems. His purpose was greater than your pain, and his power was more than enough to carry you through.